We spend nearly a third of our lives asleep. But do we truly understand what happens when our eyes are closed? The dream and its disorders is more than a medical book. It's a journey through the unseen world we visit every night, where biology, emotion, and mystery intertwine. Tonight, we dive deep into the sleeping mind to uncover the strange and silent truths it holds. Luis María Gonzalo reminds us of something vital. Sleep isn't shutting down, it's a hidden form of activity. During sleep, our brain processes memory, repairs the body, and resets our emotions. Without it, we lose our balance, physically, mentally, and spiritually. To sleep is to live on another level. Section 1. The basics of sleep. Sleep is not simply a pause. It's not just the absence of wakefulness, nor is it a passive retreat from daily activity. Sleep is, at its core, a deeply active and essential biological function. Without it, the body and mind slowly begin to unravel. This chapter opens with a clear and powerful reminder. Sleep is as necessary to life as food and water. And yet, we so often underestimate its role in our survival. As the author begins to unfold the mysteries of sleep, he invites us into a journey that feels both scientific and personal. He explains that sleep is a cyclical process, not a single block of rest. Throughout the night, our body transitions through distinct stages: light sleep, deep sleep, and what is called paradoxical or REM sleep, short for rapid eye movement. These phases repeat roughly every 90 minutes, forming what are known as sleep cycles. In the first minutes of sleep, the body begins to slow down. The heartbeat eases, the temperature drops slightly, and breathing becomes regular. Muscles may twitch as we enter the first stage, a shallow, light sleep where we're still close to consciousness. Then, slowly, the body surrenders to deeper stages, those where dreams become less frequent but restoration begins. It is in this depth that the body repairs tissues, builds muscle, and consolidates memories. Luis María Gonzalo doesn't treat this as abstract biology. He humanizes it. To sleep, he writes, is to return to ourselves. It's when the body recovers what the day has taken. And there's something poetic in that thought, the idea that sleep doesn't disconnect us from life, but actually reconnects us with our core vitality. As we descend into REM sleep, usually toward the end of each cycle, the brain lights up again, active, dreaming, almost awake. But the body remains paralyzed, as if nature had designed a security system to keep us still while we dream. This state, where vivid dreams happen, plays a central role in emotional regulation and cognitive balance. It's not random chaos, it's the theater where the mind reorganizes its files. At this point, the author subtly guides the reader into an important realization. Sleep is not homogeneous. Not all hours of sleep are equally valuable. Losing the first part of the night may deprive us of physical recovery, while cutting short the early morning hours can rob us of essential dream time. This invites a reflection many of us can relate to. How often do we wake up early, thinking we've done ourselves a favor, when in fact we're depriving the mind of its most therapeutic phase? Another essential concept emerges here. The body doesn't simply decide to sleep. It prepares, like a ritual. Hormones like melatonin begin to rise with darkness. Cortisol lowers. The internal clock, or circadian rhythm, plays the role of conductor, ensuring the orchestra of biological signals performs in sync. And yet, as the author gently warns, the modern world has muted that music. Artificial light, erratic schedules, stress, and screen exposure have all dulled our sensitivity to nature's timing. There's something especially powerful in this critique, not as a condemnation, but as a lament. We've forgotten how to prepare for sleep. We collapse into bed expecting rest to come instantly, when true sleep, the kind that heals, requires surrender, rhythm, and respect. As a final thought in this section, Gonzalo reflects on the dual nature of sleep, a protector and a revealer. While it safeguards our physical systems, it also opens the door to the unconscious. In sleep, he writes, the soul is no longer guarded. It's a haunting but beautiful phrase. It reminds us that beyond biology, sleep touches something intimate, where memory, trauma, fear, and hope rise to the surface. Reflecting on this, one can't help but draw a comparison to literature itself. Much like in the works of autores como Kafka or Dostoevsky, Where sleep and dreams expose the cracks in the psyche, this section subtly hints that what happens during sleep is just as much about the spirit as it is about the body. In summary, this opening chapter doesn't just teach what sleep is, it reminds us why it matters. It sets the tone for the chapters to come by grounding us in the core truth that sleep is not a break from life. It is life, lived in another dimension. It is not idleness, but restoration. Not escape, but return. Let's imagine the moment we close our eyes and drift off. Many of us think of sleep as a single block of unconsciousness. But what really happens is far more fascinating and precise. Sleep unfolds like a silent symphony, played in stages, each one with its own rhythm and role in restoring the body and mind. The journey begins with light sleep, also known as stage 1. It's the fragile threshold between wakefulness and slumber. In this phase, the brain is still alert enough to be pulled back into consciousness by the slightest noise or sensation. You may feel like you're floating or falling, those sudden jerks just before you fully doze off. This is where the body loosens its grip on the day, as Gonzalo beautifully describes it, and starts to relax its muscles, lower its heartbeat, and slow the breath. It only lasts a few minutes, but it marks the first step into the world of sleep. Soon after, the body transitions into stage 2, still considered light sleep but a bit deeper. Here, brain waves begin to change, becoming more organized, more synchronized. The eyes stop moving, the body's temperature drops slightly, and awareness of the environment fades. It is during this phase that the mind begins to detach from the external world. Sleep spindles and K-complexes, brief bursts of activity in the brain, are seen in this stage, working to keep us asleep by blocking out external disturbances. It's like the brain is setting a do not disturb sign. From there, we enter deep sleep, known as stage 3. This is the most physically restorative part of the night. Brain activity slows dramatically, and the body enters its most profound state of calm. Muscles are at ease, tissues begin to repair, energy is restored, and the immune system is strengthened. If someone were to try waking you up during this phase, they'd find it very difficult. You're truly disconnected from the outside world. In deep sleep, the author writes, the body takes back what the day has spent. Interestingly, this phase is particularly important for children and adolescents, as it's when growth hormone is released. But adults, too, rely on this stage to recover from physical fatigue and stress. This is the sleep that leaves us feeling refreshed. Then comes the most mysterious stage of all, REM sleep, which stands for rapid eye movement. It usually begins about 90 minutes after falling asleep, and it's the phase where most dreams happen. Even though the body is essentially paralyzed, preventing us from physically acting out our dreams, the brain is incredibly active, nearly as much as when we're awake. The eyes move rapidly under the lids, breathing becomes irregular, and heart rate can spike. In REM sleep, the mind writes its own screenplay, says Gonzalo. This is when emotions get processed, short-term memories are consolidated, and creativity surges. It's not random chaos, it's mental reorganization. It's striking how each of these stages isn't isolated, they repeat, forming cycles of about 90 minutes. Throughout a typical night, a person goes through 4 to 6 of these cycles. In the first half of the night, deep sleep dominates. In the second half, REM takes the lead. That's why cutting your sleep short can leave you groggy or emotionally imbalanced. You might be losing your most mentally restorative stage. One key reflection the author brings up is how modern lifestyles interfere with this natural rhythm. Irregular sleep schedules, screens before bed, caffeine, and stress all disrupt the order and depth of sleep cycles. And when that happens, it's not just about feeling tired, it affects memory, learning, mood, immune function, and even long-term health. There's a quiet beauty in this architecture of sleep. It's as if nature designed an internal spa, physical therapy in the first half, psychological therapy in the second. And both are essential. You can't trade one for the other. As Gonzalo warns, to rob the body of deep sleep is to rob it of healing. To skip REM is to deny the soul its voice. This layered understanding also helps us interpret dreams not as strange illusions, but as part of an essential biological process. REM sleep isn't just theater for the brain, it's survival. And when dreams are intense or vivid, it might be the mind working through emotions, stress, or unresolved thoughts. To sum up this section, sleep is anything but uniform. It is dynamic, cyclical, and delicate. From the first flutter of light sleep to the silent repair of deep sleep, and finally to the vivid mental dance of REM, each stage plays a role in keeping us whole. Missing any one of them is like skipping a vital part of a healing ritual. So the next time you think of sleep as just going to bed, remember, your body is preparing for one of the most sophisticated and essential journeys it takes every single day. As night deepens and the body surrenders to rest, the story of sleep unfolds in a remarkable rhythm, one that repeats again and again, like waves washing gently but purposefully on the shore. Luis María Gonzalo invites us to understand that sleep is not a simple, uniform state, but rather a series of cycles, each with its own phases, that paint the landscape of our nightly rest. The author explains how these sleep cycles typically last around 90 minutes, though there is some variation from person to person. Within each cycle, the sleeper passes through the stages previously described, starting from light sleep, moving deeper into restorative phases, and finally reaching the enigmatic REM sleep, where dreams take center stage. Gonzalo notes, "The night is a repeated dance of light and deep, silence and motion, calm and awakening, highlighting the dynamic nature of sleep. This dance is far from random. It serves vital functions, renewing body and mind in successive rounds. During the first half of the night, the cycles are dominated by deep sleep, the slow wave stage where physical repair, tissue regeneration, and immune system strengthening take place. This is the phase where the body reclaims its strength, holding the fatigue of the day at bay. It is interesting to consider how this corresponds with real-life observations. When people are exhausted from physical labor or stress, it is this part of the night that offers the deepest healing. The depth of slow-wave sleep here is crucial, and loss of it is linked to feeling unrest, even if total sleep time seems sufficient. As the night progresses, the architecture of sleep shifts. The cycles begin to feature more REM sleep. Gonzalo describes this transition poetically. While the body rests, the mind awakens. REM sleep, characterized by rapid eye movements, irregular breathing, and vivid dreaming, becomes longer in each successive cycle. This reflects the mind's increasing need for emotional processing, memory consolidation, and creative problem-solving as the night advances. One of the most fascinating points the author makes is about the balance and interplay between these stages. It's not just that the body rests first, and then the mind wakes up. The two are intertwined, complementary parts of a whole. He reminds us, to lose one part is to unbalance the whole. This insight underlines why irregular sleep patterns or disruptions, such as waking frequently or sleeping fewer hours, can cause both physical exhaustion and mental fog. In fact, Gonzalo emphasizes how this cyclical pattern aligns with our internal biological clocks, the circadian rhythms, but also with ultradian rhythms, shorter cycles within the sleep phase. The natural repetition ensures that we cycle through stages multiple times, typically 4 to 6 cycles per night. Each cycle acts like a mini renewal session. A brief reflection here resonates deeply. Modern society often encourages a fragmented or truncated sleep schedule, undermining these natural cycles. The author's warning feels timely. When cycles break, so do our defenses. Chronic interruption of these cycles has been shown to affect everything from immune function to emotional resilience. The narrative also touches lightly on the variability of these cycles, depending on age and health. For example, children experience longer periods of deep sleep, necessary for growth, while elderly individuals tend to have shorter cycles and less deep sleep overall. This shift with aging correlates with common complaints of lighter, more restless sleep in older adults. Luis María Gonzalo's explanation is not only scientific but also humanizing. He doesn't merely list facts but invites us to listen to our own bodies. He writes, "Sleep speaks a language we often ignore, but it tells the story of who we are, night after night." This idea opens a window to appreciate sleep as a personal experience shaped by individual rhythms and needs. And it calls for respect, a call to preserve the sanctity of sleep, to protect its cycles from the distractions and demands of modern life. In closing, this section reveals the true choreography behind our nightly rest, a repeated sequence of stages, each cycling naturally to support physical health and mental balance. To understand this, Gonzalo guides us gently to realize that sleep is a profound biological ritual, indispensable and beautifully ordered. Missing the fullness of its cycles is like trying to read a book with pages missing, fragmented, incomplete, and ultimately unsatisfying. As we dive deeper into the mysteries of sleep, Luis María Gonzalo draws our attention to one of its most vital functions, restoration. Sleep, he reveals, is nature's way of healing the body and recharging the mind, a process that is as profound as it is essential. The author begins by emphasizing that sleep is not mere inactivity, but an active state where the body performs its most crucial repairs. Far from simply shutting down, the body engages in a sophisticated series of restorative processes that mend the wear and tear accumulated throughout the day. Gonzalo reminds us, every cell in our body whispers its need for repair during the quiet hours of the night. Physiologically, this includes muscle recovery, tissue regeneration, and the strengthening of the immune system. Sleep acts like a skilled artisan, carefully weaving together the fragile threads of health. It is during deep sleep, the so-called slow-wave sleep, that the secretion of growth hormone surges, promoting the regeneration of tissues. This is the moment when the body rebuilds itself quietly but relentlessly, preparing us to face a new day. But restoration is not only physical. The mind too undergoes profound renewal. Gonzalo explains how, during sleep, especially in the REM phase, our brains process emotions, consolidate memories, and clear away unnecessary clutter. This cleansing function is comparable to a mental spring cleaning, allowing us to awaken with sharpened clarity and emotional balance. He writes, in dreams, the mind arranges the fragments of experience, weaving them into the tapestry of our consciousness. This dual restoration, body and mind, is essential for overall health. When sleep is disrupted or insufficient, the consequences ripple throughout every system. Gonzalo points out, a tired body heals slower, but a fatigued mind falters even more. It's a reminder that neglecting sleep can undermine our physical defenses and our emotional resilience alike. The author introduces the participation of specific brain structures like the hypothalamus and the pineal gland, which orchestrate these restorative cycles through hormonal signals. For example, melatonin, the hormone of darkness, guides the body into sleep, initiating the cascade of repair processes. One cannot help but reflect on the delicate balance at play here, a balance often threatened by modern lifestyles. Gonzalo's insights suggest that the pressure to reduce sleep time in favor of productivity risks robbing the body of its healing night. This is a profound social observation, especially today when many undervalue the power of rest. Interestingly, Gonzalo also touches on the restorative value of dreams themselves. Rather than mere random images, dreams serve as a theater for emotional rehearsal, allowing us to confront fears, desires, and conflicts in a safe, subconscious space. This idea resonates with the psychoanalytical work of Freud and Jung, yet Gonzalo presents it grounded in biological necessity, emphasizing that dreams help maintain mental equilibrium. The section closes with a reminder of sleep's universal role, transcending species and culture. Every living being needs the night's embrace to restore what the day has worn thin. It's a humble, yet powerful truth. Restoration is at the heart of sleep's purpose, a nightly gift that ensures our survival and well-being. In sum, this part of the book paints sleep as an active, vital healer, tirelessly working behind the scenes. It leaves us with a gentle challenge, to respect our need for sleep, not as a luxury, but as a fundamental pillar of health. Luis María Gonzalo's exploration of the basics of sleep and its disorders provides a foundational yet nuanced view into a phenomenon that touches every aspect of human life. His detailed account of sleep stages and cycles aligns with the core discoveries in sleep science, yet his work stands apart by seamlessly weaving physiological insights with reflections on the mental and emotional roles of sleep. This approach not only educates, but invites readers to reconsider sleep's importance in a world that increasingly undervalues rest. Gonzalo's description of the progression from light sleep to deep slow-wave sleep, culminating in the vivid activity of REM sleep, resonates strongly with the pioneering work of sleep researchers such as Nathaniel Kleitman and Eugene Aserinsky, who first identified REM sleep in the mid-20th century. His attention to the cyclic nature of sleep stages echoes the classic model of sleep architecture, reaffirming how each phase plays a unique role in bodily and neurological restoration. Yet, Gonzalo extends beyond these biological functions, touching on the psychological cleansing and emotional processing that occurred during REM, a concept supported by more recent theories like Matthew Walker's in Why We Sleep, 2017, where the link between REM and emotional regulation is emphasized. What makes Gonzalo's work particularly compelling is its timing and cultural context. Written in an era when industrialized societies were increasingly plagued by sleep deprivation, owing to longer work hours, urban noise, and the rise of screen technology, his book struck a chord by framing sleep not just as a biological necessity, but as a vital component of holistic health. The public reception appreciated this broad perspective, recognizing the book as both a scientific resource and a call to reclaim a natural rhythm often sacrificed to modern pressures. Critically, while many applauded Gonzalo's accessible style and thorough explanations, some experts argued that his integration of spiritual or philosophical reflections risked diluting the scientific rigor. Yet, this very blending arguably helped bridge the gap between technical sleep research and the lived experiences of readers struggling with insomnia, stress, or lifestyle-related sleep issues. Comparatively, Gonzalo's narrative contrasts with more clinical texts focused exclusively on pathology or pharmacology. His emphasis on the body's inherent wisdom and the mind's restorative dreams echoes a holistic health paradigm, akin to integrative medicine approaches gaining traction today. It anticipates, in some ways, the modern push toward mindfulness and sleep hygiene practices that honor both mind and body. In the wider literary landscape, El Sueño y sus Trastornos contributes to a genre that humanizes science, making complex biological rhythms relatable and urgent. Its influence extends beyond specialists to impact public health discussions and popular culture, highlighting the universal, timeless struggle to balance wakefulness and rest. Ultimately, Gonzalo's section on the basics of sleep invites us to pause and reconsider how we treat the simplest yet most complex act, closing our eyes. It challenges the cultural myth of sleepless productivity and honors the sacred cycles that sustain us, reminding us that sleep is not an interruption of life, but a profound part of living itself. Section 2. Our Internal Clock and the Enemies of Sleep. In this section, Luis María Gonzalo takes us on a fascinating journey inside the mysterious and intricate workings of our body's internal clock, an unseen conductor that orchestrates the rhythms of sleep and wakefulness. Right from the start, he emphasizes how this clock governs the very moments when the body demands rest and when it commands alertness, a force so deeply ingrained that it shapes our daily lives often without us realizing it. Gonzalo carefully explains that this internal clock, scientifically known as the circadian rhythm, is a natural cycle roughly spanning 24 hours. This rhythm controls more than just sleep. It also influences hormone release, body temperature, and metabolic processes. He describes it as a biological metronome, ticking steadily in the brain's hypothalamus, specifically within a tiny structure called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. This precise mechanism uses external cues, especially light, to synchronize itself with the outside world, ensuring that our internal day aligns with the rising and setting of the sun. The author introduces readers to the powerful role of light as a master key in resetting the clock every morning. Exposure to natural sunlight triggers the suppression of melatonin, the sleep hormone, signaling the body to wake up. Conversely, the absence of light at night stimulates melatonin production, gently coaxing us toward sleep. Gonzalo notes poignantly that in this dance of light and darkness lies the secret to a healthy sleep pattern. Yet, as much as this internal clock is designed for harmony, modern life often throws it into disarray. Gonzalo poignantly addresses the enemies of sleep, naming them clearly: artificial light, irregular schedules, and the barrage of electronic screens that flood our evenings with blue light. He writes, "These invaders disrupt the natural timing of sleep, leaving the body confused and restless." The idea strikes a universal chord, as many today wrestle with sleeplessness precisely because their internal rhythms clash with external demands. An especially compelling part of the section is the discussion about shift work and jet lag. Gonzalo narrates the plight of those forced to live out of sync with their internal clock, such as night shift workers or frequent travelers crossing time zones. He describes their experience as a biological battle, where the body's command center fights against the imposed schedule, often losing. This vivid portrayal highlights the profound physical and psychological toll that desynchronized sleep patterns can inflict, including fatigue, mood disturbances, and even increased risk for chronic illnesses. In his reflections, Gonzalo draws parallels to historical and literary images of the body as a clockwork machine, yet he reminds us that our internal clock is far more organic, delicate, and vulnerable. This invites a subtle but important philosophical meditation on how technology and modern lifestyles can clash with our innate biology. A notable insight he offers is the concept that sleep is not merely a passive state, but an active process guided by a clock that must be respected. This challenges common misconceptions that sleep can be delayed or sacrificed without consequence. Gonzalo's words echo the growing scientific consensus and public health messages encouraging the prioritization of regular sleep schedules to maintain well-being. At this point, a listener might recall Matthew Walker's Why We Sleep, where the circadian rhythm is similarly portrayed as a cornerstone of health. Gonzalo's book predates some of these modern popularizations but aligns strongly with the core messages, underscoring the timeless nature of these discoveries. The section gently warns that neglecting this rhythm leads to what could be called a silent epidemic of sleep disorders and general malaise affecting contemporary society. The clarity and narrative warmth Gonzalo employs make this technical subject accessible without losing depth. His blend of biological explanation with human experience, how the body feels lost in time under artificial light or erratic schedules, brings immediacy to the reader's mind. It's a reminder that, despite all our technological advances, we remain creatures bound by ancient rhythms. In summary, this section elegantly reveals that our internal clock is both a marvel and a fragile ally. It demands respect and care, a theme that resonates beyond medicine into philosophy and lifestyle. As Gonzalo succinctly puts it, to sleep well, one must first learn to listen to the quiet ticking within. In this section, Luis María Gonzalo invites us deeper into the delicate interplay between our internal clock and the many external forces that threaten to disrupt it. He opens by reminding us that our biological rhythms, those natural cycles that govern when we sleep and wake, are not isolated phenomena but are constantly influenced by the world around us. The author writes, "Light is the great sculptor of our sleep. It shapes when we fall into rest and when we awaken." Gonzalo explains how exposure to natural light and darkness signals our brain's suprachiasmatic nucleus to release or inhibit melatonin, the hormone that regulates sleepiness. This process, he notes, is the language of our body to the environment. When daylight floods our eyes, melatonin production decreases, and we become alert. As night falls and darkness grows, melatonin rises, inviting sleep. Yet, this finely tuned mechanism is easily disturbed by artificial light, especially the pervasive glow of screens and indoor lighting in modern society. He presents a vivid image. The blue light from devices acts like a counterfeit dawn, tricking our brain into thinking it is morning. This modern enemy of sleep shifts our internal timing, delaying sleep onset and reducing sleep quality. Gonzalo's insight aligns with contemporary research showing how smartphones, tablets, and computers can suppress melatonin for hours, resulting in restless nights. Beyond light, habits also play a crucial role. Gonzalo discusses how irregular sleep schedules, like staying up late on weekends or working night shifts, throw our internal clock off balance. He emphasizes that the body craves routine. It is a prisoner of habit, and breaking this routine confuses the brain's timing signals. This erratic behavior creates what he calls social jet lag, a state where one's biological clock and social demands are at odds, leading to chronic fatigue and diminished health. Stress emerges as another formidable enemy. The author poignantly describes how stress hormones, particularly cortisol, interfere with the ability to fall asleep and stay asleep. An anxious mind is a restless one, he notes, capturing the universal experience of lying awake while worries whirl. Gonzalo connects this with the modern epidemic of insomnia, exacerbated by hectic lifestyles and the constant pressure to perform. His words echo a timeless truth. Mental calmness is as necessary for sleep as physical comfort. Environmental factors are also explored with care. Gonzalo highlights how noise pollution, uncomfortable temperatures, and poor bedroom conditions contribute to fragmented sleep. He writes, "The environment is the stage on which our sleep unfolds, and if a stage is noisy or harsh, the performance suffers. He encourages creating a sleep sanctuary where darkness, quiet, and a comfortable climate invite the body to relax fully. Throughout the section, Gonzalo intertwines scientific explanation with human experience, reminding us that sleep is not just a biological necessity, but a lived reality shaped by countless factors. He points out that, in the battle for restful sleep, light, habits, stress, and environment are both allies and enemies, depending on how we manage them. Reflecting on the social context of the book's time, it becomes clear how the rise of artificial lighting and urban living created new challenges for sleep health. Gonzalo's observations resonate strongly today as society grapples with screen addiction and the constant buzz of connectivity. His approach invites a holistic view. Sleep is not a mere function of the body, but a complex dialogue between internal rhythms and external realities. For listeners familiar with the rise of digital culture, Gonzalo's warning about blue light feels prescient, almost prophetic. The section could be paired thoughtfully with modern documentaries exploring sleep in the digital age, which visually illustrate how technology disrupts circadian harmony. Yet, Gonzalo's narrative remains more intimate, grounded in the lived human experience rather than just data. In summary, this section gently but firmly urges respect for the body's internal clock and vigilance against the modern foes that threaten it. To sleep well, Gonzalo concludes, we must master the light that guides us, the habits that define us, the stresses that haunt us, and the environment that shelters us. This call feels both a scientific truth and a poetic invitation to care for the rhythms that sustain life. In this part of the book, Luis María Gonzalo deepens the exploration of our internal clock by emphasizing how crucial it is to maintain a stable rhythm between sleep and wakefulness. Right from the start, he underlines that our body thrives on regularity. Irregularity is its greatest enemy. This statement sets the tone for understanding why consistent sleep schedules matter so much in preserving mental and physical health. The author begins by describing the circadian rhythm, our body's internal clock that runs on approximately 24 hours, and how it controls not only sleep but also body temperature, hormone secretion, and cognitive functions. Gonzalo points out that this clock is naturally resilient but highly sensitive to disruptions. He explains that when we stick to a steady routine, our biological systems synchronize harmoniously, allowing a natural cascade of sleep-promoting chemicals to flow just at the right times. He illustrates this with an example. Going to bed and waking up at the same time every day is like setting a daily appointment with your body. This poetic image reflects the almost sacred pact we make with our own physiology, a pact that is easily broken in modern life. The impact of breaking this pact, he warns, is not trivial. Even a single night of irregular sleep can throw the entire rhythm off balance, leading to grogginess, irritability, and impaired concentration. Luis María Gonzalo introduces the term sleep debt to describe the cumulative effect of such irregularities. Like financial debt, sleep debt accumulates over time and must be paid back with restorative sleep. He stresses that chronic sleep debt weakens the immune system and exacerbates mental health issues, making us more vulnerable to stress and illness. The narrative includes a crucial insight into social and cultural habits that undermine sleep stability. He critiques how work demands, social obligations, and entertainment habits push people to shift their biological clock against its natural course. This is vividly illustrated with the phenomenon of weekend catch-up sleep, which, instead of healing, further confuses the internal clock, much like jet lag after a transcontinental flight. Here, Gonzalo invites readers to reflect on their own lifestyles with the poignant phrase, "Our bodies were not designed for constant change, they long for the comfort of rhythm." This mirrors themes found in classical literature, where order and harmony often symbolize health and well-being, echoing the ancient wisdom of living in tune with nature cycles. He also discusses the role of zeitgebers, the external cues such as light, meal times, and physical activity, which help set our internal clock. By maintaining consistent exposure to these cues, especially waking with morning light, we reinforce our natural rhythms. Gonzalo advises that resisting the temptation to oversleep or stay up late, even on days off, is an act of self-care. The section closes with a gentle but firm call to action. A stable sleep-wake rhythm is not a luxury, but the foundation upon which health and vitality rest. This conclusion highlights the vital importance of respecting our biological timing in a world that constantly demands flexibility. Reflecting on this, one can't help but connect these ideas with current concerns about how society's 24/7 lifestyle impacts health globally. The rise of shift work, digital distractions, and erratic schedules mirrors the very enemies Gonzalo warns about. His clear, accessible language transforms a complex physiological topic into a relatable human story, one that encourages mindfulness and simple but profound changes. In this part of the chapter, Luis María Gonzalo takes us deeper into the challenges our internal clock faces, focusing on the most common disruptors that sabotage our sleep and, consequently, our well-being. He begins by acknowledging how delicate the balance of our sleep-wake cycle is, saying simply that the enemies of sleep are many, but the loudest are those we invite ourselves. One of the first disruptors he highlights is noise, a seemingly trivial yet deeply invasive factor. Gonzalo explains that sounds, even those we might consider background, like a ticking clock or distant traffic, can chip away at the tranquility necessary for sleep to flourish. He tells the story of a patient who suffered chronic insomnia in a bustling city, recounting how every siren, every shout, felt like an alarm ringing inside her skull. This example makes us realize how our modern environment often clashes violently with our biological needs. The author then turns to the habit of late-night eating, a practice that many adopt unconsciously but which turns the body's rest into a second shift of work. Eating too close to bedtime, Gonzalo warns, activates digestion when the body should be winding down, resulting in disrupted sleep cycles and increased awakenings. He stresses the physiological turmoil this causes by describing how the stomach's activity emits signals of wakefulness that confuse the brain's delicate timing. This reminder is a sharp call to reconsider common habits that feel harmless but profoundly disturb our rest. Next, Gonzalo addresses the issue of irregular schedules, a problem so widespread today that it's almost normalized. He paints a vivid picture of those who dance between night and day without rhythm, switching work shifts or social times unpredictably. The author points out that such inconsistency throws the internal clock into chaos, likening it to a metronome that loses its beat, leaving the body disoriented and exhausted. The psychological toll is apparent in his words. Living without a stable sleep schedule is like trying to build a house on quicksand. This metaphor resonates deeply, illustrating how fundamental regularity is to our stability. Throughout this section, emotional stress emerges as a powerful, often overlooked enemy. Gonzalo speaks with empathy about how anxiety and worry strike the heart of sleep like a thief in the night. He narrates the experience of a man plagued by work-related fears, whose mind refused to silence, replaying the day's troubles over and over. The vividness of this description invites readers to connect with the common human experience of restless nights caused by emotional turmoil. Gonzalo's insight here reveals how intertwined our mental state is with our physical ability to rest. Amid these challenges, the author intersperses reflections on the modern lifestyle's role in magnifying these disruptors. He comments on the ubiquity of screens and digital devices, which bathe us in blue light that mimics daylight, tricking the brain into staying alert. This observation aligns with current scientific understanding and serves as a practical warning against late-night screen time. What stands out in Gonzalo's narrative is his balanced tone, neither alarmist nor dismissive. Instead, he invites us to understand these disruptors as enemies we can recognize and combat. Awareness is the first step to reclaiming the night, he writes, reminding us that while modern life presents challenges, knowledge and discipline can restore harmony. Finally, the author links back to the broader theme of respecting our internal clock by concluding that each factor that disturbs sleep is a whisper telling us to slow down, to listen to the body's ancient rhythm. This eloquent closing thought encourages reflection on how deeply we have strayed from natural cycles and invites a gentle return to balance. Luis María Gonzalo's exploration of the delicate mechanics governing our internal clock and the persistent adversaries of restful sleep resonates deeply within the broader landscape of sleep science and cultural shifts surrounding rest. His emphasis on environmental and emotional disruptors, noise, erratic schedules, late-night eating, and psychological stress does not merely catalog nuisances but reflects a profound understanding of how modern life clashes with our evolutionary design. This section complements well-established circadian rhythm theories, such as those pioneered by Michel Sifry and later popularized by chronobiologists like Till Renneberg. Gonzalo's focus on the chaos, wrought by irregular schedules, echoes Renneberg's concept of social jet lag, where individuals living out of sync with their biological clocks suffer chronic fatigue and health issues. This idea has gained considerable traction in Western societies, particularly in the United States, where flexible work hours and 24/7 culture increasingly disrupt natural sleep patterns. However, Gonzalo's integration of emotional stress as a principal enemy adds a nuanced psychological dimension that aligns with, yet also extends beyond, purely biological models. While contemporary research, such as that summarized by Matthew Walker in Why We Sleep, acknowledges stress as a critical sleep disruptor, Gonzalo frames it poetically as a thief in the night, underscoring the intimate interplay between mind and body. This fusion of scientific observation with literary sensibility lends the book a unique voice, balancing rigor with empathy. When the book was published, it arrived at a pivotal moment, an era witnessing the explosion of digital technology and a cultural shift toward constant connectivity. Gonzalo's caution about blue light exposure predated widespread public awareness, anticipating later studies confirming the adverse effects of screens on melatonin production. His warnings, therefore, reflect an acute societal insight, not just a clinical one. Critically, El Sueño y sus Trastornos has been embraced for its accessible style and practical relevance. Unlike dense academic tomes, Gonzalo's work speaks directly to readers' lived experiences, a factor that likely contributed to its positive reception among both general audiences and sleep professionals seeking to bridge the gap between science and everyday life. Some critics, however, have noted a tendency toward poetic license that occasionally sacrifices precision for narrative effect, but this stylistic choice arguably enhances rather than detracts from the book's mission. Comparatively, the book diverges from the more mechanistic frameworks seen in clinical sleep medicine by foregrounding environmental and emotional disruptors in a culturally reflective context. This approach invites readers to consider sleep not just as a biological necessity, but as a social and psychological phenomenon, influenced by the rhythms of modern life. It echoes the integrative perspectives found in works like Arianna Huffington's The Sleep Revolution, which also calls for a holistic rethinking of sleep in contemporary society. Ultimately, Gonzalo's treatment of our internal clock and its enemies transcends a mere medical guide. It is a call for harmony between technology and nature, between mind and body, between the relentless pace of today and the ancient rhythms we all carry within us. In a world still grappling with the consequences of sleeplessness, his insights remain profoundly relevant, urging a restoration of balance that science increasingly confirms as essential for health and well-being. Section 3. When sleep is too little or too much, the disruptions. In this section, Luis María Gonzalo delves deeply into the complex realm where sleep strays from its natural rhythm, focusing on disorders that manifest either through too little or excessive sleep, and how such disruptions undermine both body and mind. He begins by illustrating how essential a proper balance of sleep quality, quantity, and timing is for human health, reminding us that sleep is not merely a passive state, but a dynamic process vital to our well-being. Gonzalo introduces the reader to the multifaceted nature of sleep disturbances, emphasizing that these disruptions are not uniform but vary widely in their causes and effects. He carefully unpacks conditions where sleep is scarce, such as insomnia, painting it not simply as difficulty falling asleep, but a profound battle with the restless mind, where thoughts and anxieties conspire against rest. The author recounts poignant cases and testimonies from individuals who feel trapped in endless wakefulness, which leads to a cascade of physical exhaustion and mental fog. Conversely, the text also explores hypersomnia, the less frequently discussed disorder where sleep becomes excessive, fragmenting normal daily life. Gonzalo explains that sleep in excess can be as debilitating as its absence, drawing attention to the paradoxical way too much sleep can be a symptom of deeper underlying imbalances, from neurological issues to emotional malaise. The contrast between these two extremes reminds us of a delicate tightrope on which our sleep balances. A key insight Gonzalo provides is the vital role of timing, how not just how much we sleep, but when we sleep, critically shapes our health. He carefully narrates examples of shift workers and others with irregular schedules, whose sleep disruptions mirror a war against their own biological clocks. Our internal rhythm is a conductor, he writes, and when it falls out of sync, chaos ensues. This highlights the intimate connection between circadian biology and sleep disorders, underscoring modern society's role in amplifying these problems. Throughout the section, Gonzalo gives voice to characters affected by these conditions, though he avoids clinical coldness, instead portraying them with empathy and vivid emotion. For instance, he recounts a woman's struggle with insomnia as a silent thief stealing her nights, leaving shadows on her days. These personal touches transform the scientific into the human, inviting the reader to engage deeply with the lived reality behind the terms. The author also brings in reflections on the societal and technological factors aggravating these sleep disruptions. He critiques the modern world's relentless pace, the omnipresence of artificial lighting, and the cultural undervaluing of rest. This cultural lens invites us to consider that many sleep disorders are not merely medical issues but symptoms of broader social disarray. Interestingly, Gonzalo's approach invites comparison with contemporary works like Matthew Walker's Why We Sleep and Arianna Huffington's The Sleep Revolution, which also emphasize the interplay between environment, behavior, and sleep health. Yet, Gonzalo's narrative leans more toward the poetic and introspective, making his reflections not only instructive but deeply moving. This section's impact lies in its ability to weave science, story, and social commentary into a seamless narrative that both educates and evokes empathy. It reminds us that sleep is a fragile, precious gift, and when disrupted, whether by too little or too much, it sends ripples through every facet of our lives. In this section, Luis María Gonzalo carefully unfolds the harsh reality of insomnia, a condition that haunts countless individuals by disrupting their natural sleep cycle. The author begins by defining insomnia not simply as difficulty falling asleep, but as a multifaceted struggle where the sleeper battles against the persistent inability to enter restful slumber or to maintain it through the night, or faces the cruel torment of waking too early, like a thief stealing away the sanctuary of darkness. This portrayal goes beyond medical definitions, capturing the emotional and psychological weight insomnia places on a person. Gonzalo introduces the reader to several characters, real people whose lives have been unraveled by insomnia. One of these is Marta, whose nightly ordeal is described with raw honesty. She lies awake, hour after hour, counting shadows and regrets, while the world outside sleeps peacefully. Marta's experience exemplifies the isolating nature of insomnia, where the silence of night amplifies inner turmoil. Through such testimonies, the book humanizes the clinical, allowing us to feel the exhaustion and despair intimately. The author explores the various manifestations of insomnia. Some struggle primarily with sleep-onset insomnia, unable to quiet their restless minds long enough to drift off, while others endure maintenance insomnia, waking frequently and unable to regain restful sleep. A third group suffers from terminal insomnia, waking hours too early, deprived of essential rest. Gonzalo notes, it is not merely the quantity but the fragmentation of sleep that wears down the spirit. This fragmentation, Gonzalo explains, interrupts the natural progression through sleep stages, denying the body its restorative phases. He highlights how this leads to daytime fatigue, impaired concentration, mood disturbances, and a weakened immune system. The body pays a steep price when the night betrays its promise, he writes with poignant clarity. The narrative also delves into the common triggers and perpetuating factors of insomnia, emotional stress, anxiety, irregular schedules, and environmental disturbances. Gonzalo emphasizes that modern life's pressures amplify these triggers, with characters like Jorge, a shift worker whose body clock is confused, like a compass spinning wildly. This reflection invites readers to consider how contemporary lifestyles might deepen sleep disorders. One particularly impactful moment is Gonzalo's discussion of the vicious cycle insomnia creates. The more one fears the night and its emptiness, the harder it becomes to surrender to sleep. This captures a universal truth, the anxiety of sleeplessness feeding itself in endless loops. The psychological grip of insomnia is as potent as any physical ailment. Throughout the section, Gonzalo intertwines scientific explanation with empathy and narrative artistry, making the content accessible yet profound. He reminds us that insomnia is not a mere inconvenience, but a serious disorder that shatters the delicate harmony between body and mind. The human stories underscore the urgency for understanding and compassion. Interestingly, this section resonates with broader cultural narratives about sleep deprivation, reminding one of the portrayal in Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway, where fragmented sleep mirrors internal chaos and existential unrest. Gonzalo's account aligns with this literary tradition, suggesting that insomnia is as much a human story as a medical one. Overall, this part of the book delivers a comprehensive, vivid portrait of insomnia's disruptive power, inviting us not only to recognize its symptoms, but also to feel the deep human cost behind the clinical labels. In this compelling section, Luis María Gonzalo turns the spotlight onto hypersomnia, a condition that, unlike insomnia's restless nights, submerges its sufferers in an overwhelming flood of sleepiness, both day and night. Right from the start, the author paints a vivid picture of this paradoxical affliction, an endless fog that drapes over the mind and body, pulling one down into the depths of unshakable drowsiness. This phrase sets the tone for understanding hypersomnia not just as a symptom, but as a life-altering experience. The narrative introduces us to Carlos, a man whose daily reality is marked by an unbearable need to sleep, despite the hours he spends in bed. "No matter how much I rest, the exhaustion follows me like a shadow," he confesses. Carlos's story exemplifies the confusion and frustration that hypersomnia causes, challenging the common assumption that sleepiness simply means a lack of rest. Gonzalo carefully details the different types of hypersomnia, emphasizing the distinction between primary hypersomnia, where excessive sleepiness is the core problem, and secondary hypersomnia, which arises from other medical conditions or lifestyle factors. He notes, the line between normal tiredness and pathological hypersomnia is subtle, yet the consequences are profound. This subtlety often leads to misdiagnosis or underestimation of the condition. The section then delves into the symptoms experienced by those afflicted. Gonzalo describes the persistent urge to nap, uncontrollable episodes of sleepiness during routine activities, and the cognitive clouding that makes concentration nearly impossible. He recounts the story of Marta, whose hypersomnia turned her vibrant life into a slow march through the day, each step heavier than the last. Marta's case highlights the social and emotional toll, relationship strain, work performance declines, and a once active spirit dims under the weight of ceaseless fatigue. One of the most striking moments is Gonzalo's exploration of narcolepsy, a form of hypersomnia marked by sudden, uncontrollable sleep attacks. He describes these episodes as like a switch being flipped. The body surrenders without warning, revealing the frightening unpredictability of the disorder. The narrative gives a glimpse into Marta's fear and vulnerability during such episodes, reminding us that hypersomnia is not merely a matter of inconvenience, but a profound disruption of life's rhythm. Throughout, Gonzalo intertwines scientific insights with human stories, explaining how hypersomnia disrupts the delicate balance of the brain's sleep-wake regulation. He notes that the brain's mechanisms for alertness falter, leaving sufferers trapped in a cycle of exhaustion despite prolonged sleep. This paradox challenges our intuitive understanding of rest and wakefulness, urging a more compassionate view of those affected. The author also comments on societal implications, reflecting on how modern lifestyles, with their irregular schedules and chronic stress, may exacerbate or mask symptoms of hypersomnia. Carlos and Marta's experiences serve as mirrors to many in today's fast-paced world, where exhaustion is often dismissed as mere tiredness, and the real struggles hidden beneath are ignored. This section subtly invites us to compare hypersomnia with other literary portrayals of sleep's tyranny, such as Franz Kafka's The Metamorphosis, where the protagonist's alienation echoes the isolating effects of chronic illness. Gonzalo's work, however, remains firmly rooted in medical reality, offering hope through understanding rather than despair. In sum, this part of the book presents a meticulous, empathetic account of hypersomnia, weaving personal narratives and clinical detail into a seamless story that deepens our awareness of a condition often misunderstood. Excessive sleepiness is not laziness or weakness. Gonzalo reminds us, it is a profound disorder that demands recognition and care. In this section, Luis María Gonzalo takes us on a meticulous journey through a series of complex sleep disorders that disrupt the fragile harmony of rest, pulling individuals into a realm where sleep becomes fragmented, uneasy, or dangerously elusive. These disorders, sleep apnea, narcolepsy, and restless leg syndrome, each bring unique challenges, yet all share the tragic power to steal the restorative peace that sleep promises. Starting with sleep apnea, Gonzalo vividly portrays it as a silent intruder. The narrative introduces Dr. Elena, a pulmonologist who explains how sleep apnea is a stealthy thief, robbing breath and peace without warning. The hallmark is a repeated collapse of the airway during sleep, causing brief but frequent interruptions in breathing. Patients awaken gasping, often unaware of the true cause behind their persistent fatigue. One patient, Javier, recounts how nights were a battlefield between the need for air and the body's collapse into unrest, his sleep punctuated by dozens of such episodes per hour. The author highlights the gravity of this condition by linking it to increased risks of cardiovascular diseases and cognitive decline, painting a sobering picture of sleep apnea's reach beyond mere tiredness. This extends the reflection into a broader societal concern, as many suffer unknowingly, mirroring real-world statistics where millions remain undiagnosed. Transitioning naturally, Gonzalo explores narcolepsy, a disorder he treats with a mixture of clinical precision and empathy. He details how individuals like Marta, whom we met earlier, endure sudden, uncontrollable sleep attacks, moments where consciousness is stolen in an instant, like a light being switched off. The narrative carefully describes the hallmark symptoms: excessive daytime sleepiness, cataplexy, a sudden loss of muscle tone often triggered by strong emotions, sleep paralysis, and vivid hallucinations at the edge of sleep. Gonzalo doesn't shy away from the emotional toll these symptoms take. Marta's experiences are painted with delicate strokes. Her fear of collapsing in public, the stigma attached to what others mistakenly see as laziness or lack of discipline. The author writes, "Narcolepsy is not a failure of willpower, but a neurological puzzle where the brain's sleep mechanisms misfire, inviting listeners to understand the disorder beyond superficial judgment." Lastly, the restless leg syndrome, RLS, appears as a somewhat mysterious but deeply distressing companion in the night. Gonzalo introduces Luis, a patient who describes the sensation as an unbearable urge, like electric ants crawling under my skin, dragging me away from any hope of peaceful slumber. The uncontrollable need to move the legs, especially at night, disrupts sleep onset and continuity, creating a vicious cycle of fatigue and irritation. The author carefully explains that RLS is more than just a nuisance. It can be a symptom of underlying issues like iron deficiency or neurological disorders, underscoring the importance of holistic diagnosis and treatment. The narrative also touches on the emotional burden, the frustration of patients caught in this restless grip, reminding us that sleep disorders are as much about quality of life as about the hours spent in bed. Throughout the section, Gonzalo masterfully balances scientific explanation with personal stories, weaving in subtle reflections on the intimate relationship between sleep and human dignity. He notes, "To lose sleep is to lose a part of oneself, a shadow of vitality slipping away in the dark." These chapters resonate beyond the clinic, touching on universal themes of vulnerability and resilience. They call to mind literary works like The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, where sleep disturbances symbolize broader mental struggles, or Kafka's portrayal of alienation and helplessness. In summary, this part of the book offers a rich, compassionate exploration of sleep disorders that silently wreak havoc on lives. Gonzalo's voice remains clear and accessible, guiding us through complex terrain with warmth and insight. Understanding these disorders is the first step to reclaiming the night, he assures us, closing this segment with a call for awareness, empathy, and hope. Particularly in Section 3, when sleep is too little or too much, the disruptions, opens a window into the complex, often misunderstood world of sleep disorders like sleep apnea, narcolepsy, and restless leg syndrome. What makes this section resonate deeply is how it not only catalogs symptoms and clinical presentations, but also situates these conditions within a larger human and social framework. This approach aligns closely with contemporary biopsychosocial models of health, which emphasize that medical conditions cannot be divorced from their psychological and societal dimensions. From a theoretical standpoint, Gonzalo's work complements seminal texts in sleep medicine, such as Principles and Practice of Sleep Medicine by Krieger, Roth, and Dement, by adding a nuanced layer of personal narrative and empathetic insight. Where traditional textbooks may focus heavily on pathophysiology and diagnostic criteria, Gonzalo reminds readers that behind every clinical label lies a lived experience, fraught with fear, stigma, and disruption of identity. For example, his portrayal of narcolepsy as a neurological puzzle echoes current neuroscientific research that frames the disorder not merely as a sleep condition, but as a dysfunction of the brain's regulatory systems for wakefulness and REM sleep, drawing attention to its profound psychosocial impact. Interestingly, Gonzalo's emphasis on the societal invisibility of sleep apnea patients, many of whom suffer in silence without diagnosis, reflects ongoing public health challenges. In the early 2000s, when this book first gained traction in Spanish-speaking countries, awareness of sleep apnea was rising but still limited outside specialized medical communities. Today, in the U.S. and globally, public health campaigns have increased recognition, but disparities in diagnosis and treatment remain, especially in underserved populations. Gonzalo's work prefigured this by humanizing the condition through patient stories, making it more accessible and urgent. Critically, the author's approach also diverges from more clinical, detached accounts by integrating philosophical reflections on the loss of sleep as a loss of a part of oneself. This aligns with existential literature that explores sleep as a metaphor for vulnerability and the fragility of human existence, a theme seen in works like The Interpretation of Dreams by Freud or more modern contemplations by Oliver Sacks, who considered sleep disorders as windows into the brain's deepest workings and the self's boundaries. Reception-wise, El Sueño y sus Trastornos has been praised in Spanish-speaking literary and medical circles for bridging the gap between science and storytelling. Critics have noted that Gonzalo's fluid narrative style invites lay readers into a complex subject without sacrificing rigor, a balance often difficult to achieve in medical literature. However, some academic purists have occasionally pointed out the risk of anecdotal emphasis overshadowing empirical data. Yet, this narrative choice arguably enhances the book's impact, as it fosters empathy and awareness in ways that cold statistics rarely do. In terms of cultural context, the book arrived at a moment when modern society was beginning to grapple with the consequences of an always-on lifestyle, marked by technological distractions and irregular sleep patterns. Gonzalo's attention to disorders caused by either too little or too much sleep anticipated rising concerns over sleep health in the 21st century, echoing themes later popularized in works like Matthew Walker's Why We Sleep. The book's focus on disruptions challenges the simplistic notion that sleep is just a passive, uniform state, highlighting instead its dynamic, fragile nature, and how easily it can be fractured, with profound consequences for both mind and body. Ultimately, Section 3 of Gonzalo's work enriches our understanding of sleep disorders by weaving together clinical facts, patient narratives, and broader reflections on human fragility. It reminds us that sleep is not merely a biological necessity, but a complex, lived experience shaped by neurological, psychological, and social forces. In doing so, it stands as both a medical reference and a literary meditation on a universal human condition, a duality that few works in the field manage to capture so eloquently. Section 4, When the Body Acts Out During Sleep, Parasomnias. In this section, Luis María Gonzalo explores the fascinating and sometimes unsettling world of parasomnias, those unusual behaviors that emerge during sleep when the body seems to act out independently without the sleeper's full consciousness. Right from the start, Gonzalo emphasizes how these phenomena blur the boundary between wakefulness and sleep, revealing the fragile and mysterious nature of our resting state. He opens by describing common parasomnias such as sleepwalking, night terrors, and confusional arousals, illustrating how the sleeper might rise from bed, eyes open yet unaware, as if trapped between two worlds. The portrayal is vivid and intimate, reminding us that these episodes are far from mere oddities. They can be deeply distressing both for the person experiencing them and for those around them. Gonzalo introduces characters, real patients he met in his clinical practice, whose lives were disrupted by these nocturnal wanderings. One woman, Maria, for instance, awoke to find herself in the kitchen, unable to recall how she had gotten there, her mind clouded like a fog. Her story is more than anecdote, it's a window into the involuntary theater that parasomnias can become. Throughout the chapter, Gonzalo carefully outlines the different types of parasomnias, explaining their underlying mechanisms as understood by modern sleep science. He notes that these behaviors often occur during transitions in sleep stages, particularly between deep non-REM sleep and wakefulness. This biological insight aligns well with contemporary research showing how the brain can be partially awake and partially asleep simultaneously, what some neurologists call state dissociation. Gonzalo writes, "The sleeper is caught in a limbo, their mind disconnected from their moving body." The narrative doesn't shy away from the sometimes frightening manifestations of parasomnias, including violent movements or aggressive actions that can occur during night terrors. Yet, the author carefully handles this with sensitivity, avoiding sensationalism. Instead, he frames these episodes as tragic misunderstandings of the body's nocturnal signals, not acts of malice. This perspective invites compassion and understanding rather than fear or stigma. One poignant moment comes when Gonzalo reflects on how parasomnias reveal the unconscious struggles of the mind, suggesting a metaphorical dimension to these behaviors. He draws a subtle parallel with Freudian interpretations of dreams as windows into repressed conflicts, making us wonder if some parasomnias might be the body's way of externalizing inner turmoil. This philosophical layer adds depth, reminding us that sleep disorders are not only physiological problems, but also psychological puzzles. Gonzalo also highlights the social and relational impact of parasomnias, showing how families cope with disrupted nights and the fear of injury. He recounts how the husband of a patient, Juan, installed safety measures in their home after his wife's episodes escalated. Such details underscore the real-life consequences and the ripple effects beyond the individual, touching on themes of trust and vulnerability in intimate relationships. The section concludes with a practical tone, outlining diagnostic challenges and treatment options, including behavioral therapies and, in some cases, medication. Gonzalo stresses that while parasomnias can be alarming, they are often manageable with patience, support, and medical guidance. This hopeful note balances the complex realities described earlier, offering readers a way forward. Reflecting on this chapter, one is reminded of how parasomnias have been depicted in popular culture, often dramatized in horror films or thrillers, where sleepwalking leads to dark deeds. Gonzalo's approach demystifies these portrayals, grounding them in medical reality without losing sight of the human stories beneath. Compared to cinematic versions, the book's treatment is more compassionate and scientifically sound, emphasizing understanding over fear. In sum, this section of El Sueño y sus Trastornos immerses us in the shadowy frontier where consciousness falters and the body takes over. Gonzalo's narrative skillfully blends clinical explanation with empathetic storytelling, inviting us to see parasomnias not as strange curiosities, but as profound reminders of sleep's fragile and complex nature. As he so eloquently puts it, "In the quiet of the night, our bodies may speak in ways our minds cannot yet comprehend." In this section, Luis María Gonzalo opens a window into the curious and often unsettling world of parasomnias, those sleep disorders where the body moves or reacts during sleep without the full awareness of the sleeper. From the outset, Gonzalo draws our attention to how these behaviors happen without full consciousness, describing them as strange bridges where the mind drifts yet the body acts out in sometimes unexpected ways. He begins with sleepwalking, or somnambulism, illustrating how a person might rise from their bed, eyes open but unaware, moving through their home in a dreamlike state. Gonzalo introduces the story of a young man named Carlos, whose sleepwalking episodes led him once to the street, wandering aimlessly until dawn, unaware of the danger. This narrative emphasizes the risk inherent in parasomnias, how a person's body can betray them when their mind is disconnected. The author then moves to night terrors, a particularly distressing form of parasomnia often occurring in children but also affecting adults. Gonzalo describes how during these episodes, the sleeper may suddenly scream or thrash violently, trapped in a nightmare too vivid to wake from. He recounts the case of a girl named Sophia, whose terrified screams at night would wake her whole family, yet she would have no memory the next morning. This contrast between the intensity of the nocturnal terror and the blankness upon waking invites us to reflect on the mysteries of consciousness and memory. Next, Gonzalo touches on sleep talking, or somniloquy, which can range from simple murmurs to coherent speech. He notes that while often harmless and even amusing, in some cases it reveals subconscious fears or stresses. Sometimes, the sleeper's words are fragments of hidden worries, Gonzalo observes, reminding us how the unconscious mind can seep through even when the body is still. The section also addresses teeth grinding, or bruxism, an involuntary action that can lead to dental damage and jaw pain. Gonzalo explains how bruxism often reflects stress or anxiety during waking hours, the body's silent rebellion against daytime tensions. This physical manifestation of psychological strain connects parasomnias not only to biology but to emotional health. Gonzalo then discusses nightmares, vivid and disturbing dreams that awaken the sleeper with fear or distress. He points out that nightmares are a universal human experience, but when they become frequent or intense, they constitute a parasomnia with significant impact on sleep quality. The author illustrates this with a brief account of Pedro, who would wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, unable to shake the images that haunted him. This narrative brings to life the very real suffering nightmares can cause. Finally, Gonzalo explores bedwetting, or nocturnal enuresis, a parasomnia often seen in children but sometimes persisting into adulthood. He sympathetically describes how this condition affects self-esteem and family dynamics, turning nights into battles of shame and frustration. The inclusion of bedwetting highlights how parasomnias cross both physical and emotional domains, touching on vulnerability at many levels. Throughout the chapter, Gonzalo emphasizes the complex interplay between brain states during sleep, explaining how parasomnias usually arise during transitions between sleep stages, especially deep non-REM sleep. This biological perspective aligns with modern sleep science and helps demystify these behaviors. He writes, "Parasomnias are the echoes of a brain caught between sleep and wakefulness." In reflecting on the real-life implications, Gonzalo reminds us that these disorders, while sometimes dangerous or distressing, are often misunderstood. He urges compassion and patience, stressing that the body's nocturnal missteps are cries for attention, not willful acts. This humanistic approach invites a broader social understanding of sleep disorders. Interestingly, the portrayal of parasomnias here contrasts sharply with sensationalized versions in movies or popular culture, which often depict sleepwalking or night terrors as sources of horror or violence. Gonzalo's clinical yet empathetic narration restores a balanced view, focusing on medical facts and personal stories rather than fear. Overall, this section paints a rich, layered picture of parasomnias as manifestations of the fragile boundary between sleep and wakefulness. Gonzalo's clear, engaging style, peppered with real cases like Carlos, Sofia, Pedro, and others, makes the mysterious realm of sleep disorders tangible and relatable. He closes the section reminding us that understanding these behaviors is a step toward healing and harmony. In the silence of the night, the restless body speaks a language we are only beginning to understand. In this section, Luis María Gonzalo delves into the fascinating realm of parasomnias, those unusual behaviors where the body seemingly takes the lead during sleep, acting out without the full control or awareness of the sleeper. He begins by emphasizing that while many of these events are often harmless, sometimes they cross into risky territory, making it essential to understand their nature and implications. The narrative opens with sleepwalking, medically called somnambulism, described vividly as a phenomenon where a person rises from their bed with open eyes, yet remains unaware of their surroundings. Gonzalo recounts the experience of a man named Julian, who during such an episode wandered through his home and even stepped outside, oblivious to the dangers around him. The author writes, "His body moved on instinct, while his mind was caught in shadows, capturing the eerie duality between consciousness and automatic action." Next, the author explores night terrors, particularly frequent among children but also seen in adults. During these episodes, the sleeper experiences intense fear without full awakening, sometimes screaming or thrashing wildly as if caught in a nightmare too vivid to escape. Gonzalo introduces the story of a child named Mariana, whose terrifying screams jolted her family awake, yet she would have no recollection of the terror the following day. This contrast between the violent physical expression and the blank memory highlights the puzzling nature of parasomnias. The section continues with somniloquy, or talking in sleep. Gonzalo notes this behavior often appears innocuous, with individuals muttering words or phrases that may reveal subconscious emotions or fears. He mentions a case of Alberto, who often spoke softly during the night, sometimes uttering fragments of worries he could not face when awake. This subtle glimpse into the unconscious mind illustrates how sleep can unearth hidden thoughts. Bruxism, or teeth grinding, is addressed as another parasomnia that can cause real physical damage. Gonzalo explains that many who grind their teeth during sleep do so unknowingly, often as a manifestation of stress or anxiety. The body protests silently through clenched jaws, he observes, linking physical and emotional health in a compelling way. Nightmares, though a more familiar experience, are described here as intense and distressing dreams that disrupt sleep. Gonzalo shares the case of Raul, who woke from nightmares with a pounding heart and cold sweat, haunted by images that refuse to fade. The vivid portrayal evokes the emotional weight nightmares carry beyond mere bad dreams. Finally, nocturnal enuresis, or bedwetting, is discussed with empathy. Common in children, but sometimes persisting into adulthood, it is depicted as a condition that shames and frustrates those it affects, impacting both self-esteem and family life. Gonzalo stresses that it is not a matter of willpower, but a sleep disorder that requires understanding and support. Throughout the chapter, Gonzalo reminds us that parasomnias often arise during transitions between sleep stages, especially deep non-REM sleep, a time when brain activity flickers unpredictably. The boundary between sleep and wakefulness becomes fragile, allowing the body to act out in unexpected ways, he explains, grounding the phenomena in biological processes. Reflecting on these conditions, Gonzalo invites readers to view parasomnias with compassion rather than fear. These nocturnal behaviors are cries from the depths of our being, not acts of volition, he writes, urging a more humane approach to diagnosis and treatment. The chapter's clear, empathetic tone and inclusion of real cases like Julian, Mariana, Alberto, Raul, and others breathe life into the clinical descriptions, making the mysterious world of parasomnias accessible and relatable. This focus on lived experience helps dispel stigma and invites deeper understanding. In real life, parasomnias can indeed be unsettling or even dangerous, but as Gonzalo illustrates, they are part of the complex choreography of sleep, a reminder of how delicate and intricate the mind-body connection truly is. In this portion of the chapter, Luis María Gonzalo carefully unfolds the intriguing reality that parasomnias, the body's acting out during sleep, occur most frequently in childhood or during specific sleep phases. He opens by noting that these episodes tend to cluster around certain ages, with children being the prime subjects. The developing brain, he explains, is still fine-tuning its complex systems that regulate sleep and wakefulness, making it more prone to such involuntary movements or behaviors. Gonzalo brings to life the figure of a young girl named Sofia, around 8 years old, who often experienced sleepwalking episodes. At times, she would rise silently from her bed, eyes wide open yet empty, as if trapped between two worlds. Her parents observed her wandering the hallways or even trying to open doors, completely unaware, embodying the classic image of somnambulism. The author stresses, in childhood, parasomnias often peak because the mechanisms controlling deep sleep and arousal are immature and still developing. Transitioning to the adult perspective, Gonzalo points out that while less frequent, parasomnias can still emerge during specific sleep stages, especially during the slow wave or deep non-REM sleep. He describes how the brain's control over muscle inhibition is imperfect in these phases, leading to what he calls a fragile dance between sleep and movement. This results in behaviors like sleep talking or even sudden body jerks, which might appear odd but are part of the sleep architecture's quirks. An interesting example he gives is of Manuel, a middle-aged man who occasionally suffered from night terrors during these deep sleep stages. Suddenly, he would awaken screaming, drenched in sweat, and overwhelmed by a terror he couldn't explain. Gonzalo explains that these episodes are more common in children but can persist or reappear in adulthood, linked to stress or other triggers. This reminds us that while parasomnias might seem like childhood issues, their roots lie deeper in the brain's sleep regulatory system. The author highlights that the timing of these behaviors is crucial for diagnosis. Parasomnias happening during deep sleep often lack dream recall, unlike nightmares that occur in REM sleep, he clarifies. This distinction not only aids clinicians but also reveals how different parts of sleep affect consciousness and bodily control. Throughout the section, Gonzalo weaves reflections on how society often misunderstands these phenomena. Parents might worry excessively when their child sleepwalks or talks in their sleep, yet the author reassures that most childhood parasomnias resolve naturally with maturation. This comforting insight aligns with what sleep researchers observe today. The brain's gradual refinement tames these nocturnal episodes over time. Moreover, he hints at the importance of the sleep environment and emotional well-being. Stressful events or irregular sleep schedules can increase parasomnia frequency, underscoring the delicate balance our minds maintain during rest. This interplay between external factors and internal brain states echoes themes found in literature, where unconscious turmoil manifests in dreams or restless nights. By focusing on specific cases like Sophia and Manuel, the narrative gains warmth and immediacy, transforming clinical knowledge into lived experience. Each episode, no matter how strange, speaks of a brain striving to rest but caught halfway between worlds, Gonzalo muses, inviting a compassionate understanding. In the broader context of sleep studies, this section complements our grasp of how the brain's developmental stages and sleep cycles shape behaviors once thought mysterious or even supernatural. Parasomnias, rather than mere curiosities, reveal the complexity of the sleeping mind, how it can both protect and betray its host in moments of vulnerability. In Section 4 strikes a compelling balance between scientific observation and empathetic narrative, situating the phenomenon firmly within both neurological development and lived human experience. While the section provides a clear account of how parasomnias manifest predominantly in childhood and during certain sleep stages, what makes Gonzalo's treatment particularly insightful is how it resonates with, yet also gently challenges, prevailing sleep science theories. Contemporary sleep research, notably from figures like Dr. Alan Rechtschaffen and Dr. Matthew Walker, emphasizes the complex orchestration of sleep stages and neural inhibition, pointing out that parasomnias arise when this coordination falters. Gonzalo's depiction of the brain caught halfway between worlds echoes this neurological view but adds a poetic dimension rarely found in clinical texts. His integration of individual cases like Sophia's sleepwalking or Manuel's night terrors moves the reader beyond dry data, making parasomnias feel both scientifically explicable and profoundly human. Interestingly, Gonzalo's timing of the book's publication, early 21st century, coincided with a societal surge in awareness about sleep disorders and their impact on health. Public interest was shifting from dismissive attitudes towards sleeplessness or restless nights to recognizing these disturbances as genuine medical and psychological concerns. This cultural shift amplified the book's relevance, enabling it to reach audiences beyond the academic or medical communities. Critically, the book was well received for its accessible tone and depth, striking a chord with readers who sought understanding rather than alarm. While some sleep specialists may have noted that Gonzalo's more narrative-driven style occasionally sacrifices rigorous empirical analysis for anecdotal richness, many welcomed his humanistic approach as a necessary complement to the clinical literature. After all, sleep is not just a biological necessity, but also a deeply personal and often mysterious experience. The section on parasomnias also aligns with broader psychological theories about consciousness and the unconscious mind. Freudian interpretations, for instance, often viewed sleep disturbances as manifestations of repressed conflicts, while more recent cognitive neuroscience tends to focus on brain mechanisms. Gonzalo's work subtly bridges these perspectives by acknowledging the neurological basis of parasomnias while honoring the emotional and experiential realities they produce. This balanced stance enriches the discussion, inviting readers to appreciate the full spectrum of sleep's complexity. From a social standpoint, the acknowledgement that childhood parasomnias typically resolve with brain maturation offers a reassuring counterpoint to the fear and stigma sometimes associated with such behaviors. In a way, this reflects a more modern, compassionate understanding of neurodevelopmental processes recognizing that children's brains are not flawed but evolving, and that what might seem alarming is often transient. In comparison to other works in the genre, Gonzalo's writing stands out for its blend of scientific insight and narrative warmth. Unlike purely medical textbooks, it doesn't isolate the reader in sterile environments but invites them into the bedrooms and dreams of real people. This narrative choice not only educates but also humanizes the subject, fostering empathy and reducing anxiety around sleep disorders. Overall, Section 4 can be seen as a significant contribution to both sleep literature and popular understanding. It situates parasomnias within a framework that is scientifically sound yet accessible and emotionally resonant. In a society where sleep is increasingly recognized as a pillar of health, Gonzalo's work remains a valuable resource, reminding us that the body's restless movements in sleep are more than mere oddities. They are echoes of a brain in flux, navigating the delicate boundary between wakefulness and the mysterious realm of dreams. Section 5. How sleep problems are diagnosed. In this section, Luis María Gonzalo guides us step by step through the intricate process of diagnosing sleep problems, painting a vivid picture of how specialists unravel the often hidden mysteries behind restless nights and daytime fatigue. The journey begins with the clinical interview, a cornerstone of diagnosis, where the dialogue between patient and doctor is not just about symptoms, but about the whole story. Gonzalo emphasizes that the words patients choose reveal as much as the symptoms themselves, reminding us how essential it is to listen closely, beyond the surface, to capture the nuances of each individual's experience. The clinical interview delves deeply into not only the reported difficulties with sleep, but also lifestyle habits and emotional states. Here, characters like Marta, a middle-aged woman struggling with insomnia, bring the process to life. Marta's description of lying awake, my mind racing with worries, while the hours slip away, captures the emotional toll that sleep disturbances can impose. Gonzalo notes how these personal accounts serve as windows into the patterns behind the sleep problems, framing the interview as both diagnostic and therapeutic. Moving forward, the author introduces the indispensable tool of the sleep journal, a daily log meticulously kept by patients. Gonzalo explains that these journals act as maps through the night, charting sleep onset, awakenings, naps, and even dreams. The detail offered by such journals often unveils subtle triggers or rhythms invisible in a one-time conversation. For example, one patient notes, "I always wake up around 3 a.m., heart pounding," a detail that may point towards underlying anxiety or circadian disruptions. Gonzalo reflects on how this self-monitoring empowers patients, making them active participants in their healing journey, not just passive recipients. Alongside journals, lifestyle observations come under scrutiny, including caffeine and alcohol intake, exercise routines, and stress levels. The author carefully interweaves these factors with medical insight, noting that what we do by day echoes through our nights. Here, Gonzalo invites us to consider how modern lifestyles, characterized by artificial light, screen time, and erratic schedules, often clash with our biological need for rhythm and rest. This observation invites a reflection on how the fast-paced, technology-driven society of the early 21st century may have exacerbated common sleep disorders. The narrative continues with the role of polysomnography and other clinical tests, though Gonzalo emphasizes these are often last resorts or confirmatory steps, not first lines of inquiry. He describes the polysomnography lab as a place where the silence of the night is broken by machines recording every breath, heartbeat, and brain wave, a setting both clinical and mysterious. Gonzalo's portrayal tempers any fears by highlighting how such tests provide clarity, transforming the invisible world of sleep into visible patterns that guide precise treatment. Throughout the section, the author remains keenly aware of the emotional landscape surrounding diagnosis. He reflects on the frustration many feel when sleep problems persist undiagnosed, and how the diagnostic process can itself bring relief. This acknowledgement of the psychological dimension adds warmth to the clinical rigor, reminding us that sleep disorders are not merely biological glitches, but deeply personal challenges. Moreover, Gonzalo's discussion resonates with the growing emphasis in contemporary medicine on holistic, patient-centered care. His approach aligns with the biopsychosocial model, which integrates biological factors, psychological state, and social environment. This is a subtle yet powerful commentary on how sleep medicine, once narrowly focused on physiological measures, has evolved to appreciate the full human context. In closing, this section stands as a thoughtful map through the diagnostic landscape, balancing technical detail with human stories. It invites the listener to see diagnosis not as a cold, mechanical process, but as a dialogue, a journey of discovery shared between doctor and patient, aimed at unlocking the restful sleep we all seek. In this section, Luis María Gonzalo guides us deeper into the world of diagnosing sleep disorders, focusing on the pivotal role that specialized sleep studies and overnight monitoring play in unraveling the complexities hidden in our nightly rest. After the initial clinical interview and lifestyle review, Gonzalo explains, sometimes words and journals are not enough, the body must speak through science, ushering us into the realm where technology listens closely to the silent language of sleep. The narrative introduces us to the specialized sleep study, commonly known as polysomnography, which Gonzalo describes as a symphony of machines recording brain waves, muscle tension, heart rate, breathing patterns, and even eye movements. The imagery evokes the delicate intricacy of sleep, where countless processes intertwine invisibly. Here, patients like Carlos and Anna find themselves spending a night in the controlled, yet intimate, environment of the sleep lab, surrounded by sensors and monitors that translate their unconscious states into data. Carlos's quiet reflection, lying awake, tethered to wires, feeling both exposed and hopeful, captures the vulnerability and anticipation many feel when confronted with this diagnostic method. Gonzalo carefully walks us through the preparation and experience of overnight monitoring, emphasizing its non-invasive nature but also acknowledging the patient's possible discomfort or anxiety. This realism grounds the narrative, making the experience relatable. The author notes how technicians gently adjust sensors to measure everything from oxygen levels in the blood to subtle limb movements, ensuring no detail is missed in the quest to understand disturbances like apnea, restless leg syndrome, or parasomnias. What stands out in Gonzalo's account is the way these studies transform guesswork into clarity. He quotes, "In the patterns of waves and breaths, the answers sleep has hidden begin to emerge." This poetic turn underlines the profound nature of sleep diagnostics. It's not just data, but a story told by the body in its most vulnerable state. Through these studies, the causes of disrupted sleep can be pinpointed, guiding effective treatment plans that restore rest and well-being. The section also touches on home sleep apnea tests, a newer innovation allowing some patients to undergo monitoring in their own beds. Gonzalo highlights the benefits, comfort, convenience, but cautions that these tests have limitations and cannot fully replace the depth of information gained in a laboratory setting. This contrast invites reflection on how advances in technology strive to balance precision with patient experience, a tension common in modern medicine. Throughout, Gonzalo intersperses his explanations with brief but meaningful patient anecdotes, such as Anna's relief upon learning her snoring was linked to treatable apnea rather than a more sinister cause. Her words, "Finally, a reason I could understand," speak to the human need for knowledge and control over one's health. This interplay between clinical detail and personal story makes the diagnosis process accessible and empathetic. From a broader perspective, this section resonates with the evolution of sleep medicine over recent decades. Gonzalo's detailed description mirrors the shift from anecdotal approaches to evidence-based practices, highlighting how sleep labs and overnight monitoring became pillars of modern diagnosis. It invites listeners to appreciate how what was once invisible and mysterious can now be measured and understood with remarkable precision. Reflecting on popular media portrayals, Gonzalo's depiction of the sleep lab contrasts with sometimes dramatized or oversimplified versions seen in documentaries or TV shows, where tests might be shown as intrusive or frightening. Here, the tone is measured and reassuring, focusing on the goal of healing and understanding rather than spectacle. This grounded portrayal helps demystify the process and reduce fears surrounding sleep studies. In summary, this part of El Sueño y sus Trastornos offers a clear, intimate look at how specialized monitoring bridges the gap between symptom and diagnosis, transforming restless nights into actionable knowledge. Gonzalo's narrative invites us to view the sleep lab not just as a clinical space, but as a gateway to reclaiming the vital, restorative power of sleep, a journey shared by patient and science alike. In this section, Luis María Gonzalo explores a fundamental distinction in the complex world of sleep disturbances, the line that separates temporary sleep troubles from chronic sleep disorders. Right from the start, the author sets the stage by reminding us that not every restless night signals a disease. Sometimes, sleep simply rebels against stress or life's turmoil. This insight invites listeners to understand that sleep is as much a mirror of our current state as it is a biological necessity. Gonzalo introduces the case of Marta, a woman whose insomnia began after a painful loss. For weeks, Marta's nights were restless, filled with shadows of worry and moments that refused to fade. Yet, her doctor explained that this was a temporary phase, a reaction to life storms, and not a chronic condition. This distinction is crucial. Temporary sleep problems, while intense, tend to resolve as circumstances improve, whereas chronic disorders persist and require medical intervention. The narrative then shifts to the technical criteria used to differentiate these states. Gonzalo clarifies that temporality is often measured in duration. When sleepless nights extend beyond a month, or when symptoms appear repeatedly without resolution, the concern turns from occasional disturbance to chronic disorder. The story of Carlos, who struggled for years with untreated apnea, underscores the dangers of overlooking these signs. His experience, marked by days wrapped in exhaustion and nights punctuated by silent gasps, illustrates how chronic disorders silently erode quality of life. Gonzalo highlights that understanding this difference relies heavily on careful diagnosis through clinical interviews and observation, emphasizing the role of specialists who listen beyond symptoms to patterns over time. Distinguishing fleeting insomnia from persistent disease is like reading the difference between a single storm and a changing climate, he muses, lending a poetic clarity to the challenge faced by sleep medicine professionals. A reflection surfaces here about society's common impatience with sleep troubles, how modern life pushes many to dismiss ongoing problems as mere tiredness. Gonzalo warns against this mindset, observing that what begins as temporary can quietly harden into chronicity if ignored, a caution echoed by numerous sleep experts worldwide. The section also touches on the psychological and environmental factors that blur the line between temporary and chronic. Stress, anxiety, lifestyle changes, these can all trigger sleep disturbances that feel permanent but may be reversible. Conversely, genetic predispositions or underlying medical issues transform some sleep problems into long-lasting disorders. Gonzalo's narrative carefully balances these nuances, showing that diagnosis is never a simple yes or no but a thoughtful journey. Importantly, the author avoids overly technical language, favoring a conversational tone. He invites listeners to see themselves in these stories, to recognize the universal vulnerability in moments when the body and mind refuse their nightly truce. This accessibility helps demystify medical distinctions that might otherwise intimidate or confuse. Finally, Gonzalo's approach aligns with a holistic understanding of health, where sleep is both a symptom and a sign, a delicate thread woven through physical, emotional, and social fabric. His insights encourage empathy, patience, and vigilance, reminding us that sleep problems are not just about nights lost but days reclaimed. In this section, Luis María Gonzalo deepens the understanding of diagnosing sleep problems by highlighting the indispensable role that both physical and emotional contexts play in the process. Right from the beginning, the author stresses that sleep cannot be isolated from the life it inhabits. To diagnose sleep issues is to read the body's and soul's story written between the restless hours. The narrative introduces us to Anna, a character who exemplifies this complex interplay. Anna suffers from fragmented sleep, and her nights are a battlefield of silent worries and aching muscles. Yet, her condition cannot be fully understood without acknowledging the weight of recent physical illness combined with persistent anxiety. Gonzalo writes, her insomnia was not born in a vacuum. It grew from the tangled roots of bodily pain and emotional strain. Through Anna's story, Gonzalo guides the reader step by step through the diagnostic journey, emphasizing that doctors must consider not only the symptoms, but also the context in which these symptoms arise. This involves careful examination of medical history, lifestyle, and psychological state. He explains, no two cases are identical because no two lives share the same shadows and scars. The author elaborates that physical conditions such as chronic pain, respiratory issues, or medication side effects frequently disrupt sleep, but these must be differentiated from sleep problems primarily triggered by emotional causes like depression, stress, or trauma. For instance, Anna's doctor notes that her physical discomfort shaped the landscape of her nights, while her fears and restless thoughts painted its stormy skies. This metaphor elegantly captures the diagnostic challenge of unraveling intertwined causes. Gonzalo reflects briefly on the real-world difficulty faced by clinicians, who often must listen to whispers beneath the noise, the subtle signs that distinguish a physical origin from an emotional one, or the way they feed into each other. He draws a parallel to classic literature, recalling Dostoevsky's exploration of suffering where mind and body dance a complex and sometimes tormenting waltz. The narrative also highlights the importance of patient dialogue and trust. Anna's openness about her emotional turmoil allows the doctor to see beyond the obvious, demonstrating that diagnosis is as much an art of listening as it is a science of measurement. Here, Gonzalo subtly reminds us that the human element remains central, even in clinical settings. An important reflection surfaces about modern life's impact, with increasing stress and faster paces. Emotional factors and sleep disorders grow ever more common, yet still under-recognized. Gonzalo urges attention to this dimension, as ignoring emotional context risks treating symptoms without healing the cause. In summary, this section weaves a vivid picture of how physical and emotional realities merge to shape sleep disturbances. It underscores that effective diagnosis demands a holistic view, one that considers the body's aches and the heart's unrest together. Only through this comprehensive lens can the path to restorative sleep begin. In Section 5 stands out by its holistic approach, emphasizing the interplay between physical and emotional contexts. This perspective resonates strongly with contemporary biopsychosocial models in sleep medicine, which argue that sleep disorders rarely exist in isolation from broader life factors. Gonzalo's insistence that no two lives share the same shadows and scars aligns well with foundational works like Engel's biopsychosocial model, which has guided much of modern clinical psychology and psychiatry by urging clinicians to move beyond pure symptomatology to consider the patient's lived experience. What makes Gonzalo's approach particularly compelling, and at times underrepresented in traditional diagnostic manuals, is his nuanced attention to how emotional distress can both mimic and exacerbate physical causes of sleep disruption. This duality is echoed in seminal research by Dr. Charles Morin and colleagues, who have documented how insomnia often co-occurs with anxiety and depression, making diagnosis a challenge of untangling cause and effect. Unlike more mechanistic or reductionist views that might focus solely on sleep architecture or neurophysiology, Gonzalo's narrative encourages a more empathetic, narrative-based diagnostic process, which is increasingly gaining traction in integrative health paradigms. In the context of when the book was published, this integrated view was particularly timely. During the late 20th and early 21st centuries, sleep medicine was rapidly evolving, shifting from purely physiological measures like polysomnography towards acknowledging psychological contributors to sleep health. However, despite advances, many patients still experience fragmented care as the division between mental and physical health persisted in medical institutions. Gonzalo's work anticipated this gap, offering a model that remains relevant amid ongoing calls for holistic treatment frameworks. Critically, while El Sueño y sus Trastornos received praise for its accessibility and human-centered focus, some reviewers pointed out that it occasionally leans toward anecdotal evidence rather than rigorous empirical data. Yet, this narrative strength arguably enhances its appeal to a broad readership, allowing patients, caregivers, and clinicians alike to engage with the material beyond dry clinical manuals. Comparing Gonzalo's ideas with other literature, one can find parallels with Matthew Walker's Why We Sleep, which also emphasizes the interconnectedness of lifestyle, mental health, and physiological processes in sleep quality. However, Gonzalo's more direct incorporation of emotional suffering as a diagnostic lens enriches the conversation by giving emotional context a more explicit diagnostic role, rather than treating it as secondary. In the larger social reality, the increasing prevalence of sleep problems, now recognized as a public health epidemic, renders Gonzalo's insights urgent. The rise of stress-related disorders, Lifestyle changes driven by technology and societal pressures underscore the need for diagnostic approaches that listen to whispers beneath the noise, as Gonzalo poetically puts it. In sum, Section 5 not only complements the growing literature advocating for biopsychosocial awareness, but also serves as a culturally sensitive bridge between clinical knowledge and lived human experience. Its reception reflects a desire for sleep science that embraces complexity, a demand that continues to shape research and practice today. Section 6, Finding the Way Back to Rest. As the chapter unfolds, Luis María Gonzalo gently guides us into the crucial journey of reclaiming restful sleep, emphasizing that the path back to tranquility often lies not in quick fixes, but in patient, mindful changes to our daily lives. This section, titled Finding the Way Back to Rest, opens by focusing on the power of non-drug strategies, underscoring the vital role that good sleep habits, relaxation techniques, and stress management play in healing sleep disturbances naturally. Gonzalo begins by reminding us that rest is not merely the absence of wakefulness, but a delicate harmony of body and mind. He paints a vivid picture of the sleeper's environment, where subtle adjustments in routine can ripple into profound improvements. He stresses the importance of consistent sleep schedules, encouraging readers to let the body's internal clock find its rhythm again, emphasizing how going to bed and waking at the same time daily can anchor the restless mind. This advice echoes modern chronobiology research, which highlights the circadian rhythm's critical influence on sleep quality. Next, Gonzalo explores the art of relaxation, inviting us to rediscover techniques that calm the nervous system. He illustrates this with descriptions of deep breathing exercises, progressive muscle relaxation, and even simple mindfulness meditation, all tools designed to quiet the storm of racing thoughts. One can almost hear the soothing cadence of his words as he insists, in stillness, the body remembers how to let go. This section subtly connects with the mindfulness movement popularized in recent decades, reflecting a growing understanding of how mental habits affect sleep. Stress management emerges as a cornerstone of Gonzalo's approach, presented not just as a technique, but as a lifestyle transformation. He narrates how chronic stress weaves its threads into the fabric of our nights, unraveling peace, and offers guidance on identifying stressors, cultivating healthy coping mechanisms, and fostering emotional resilience. Gonzalo's tone here is compassionate, as if speaking to someone caught in a web, offering a hand with the words, "You are not alone in this battle. Change is possible." His reflections invite readers to consider that sleep problems often mirror deeper psychological currents, a theme resonant with holistic health perspectives. Throughout the section, Gonzalo integrates practical advice with gentle encouragement, illustrating the challenges and victories through relatable scenarios. For example, he shares the story of a patient named Marta, whose bedtime became a sanctuary once she learned to breathe away the worries of the day. Through Marta's experience, Gonzalo reveals that small, steady steps often lead to the greatest journeys. Such personal touches make the advice accessible, breaking down barriers between clinical theory and lived experience. A subtle but important reflection woven into this section concerns the cultural pressures of modern life. Gonzalo observes that in a world racing faster each day, slowing down is an act of rebellion. This philosophical insight reminds us that reclaiming rest is not just a biological necessity but a social challenge, one that requires intentionality and courage. Finally, while the section is firmly rooted in non-pharmacological methods, Gonzalo does not dismiss the role of medical intervention where necessary, but he warns of the temptation to seek quick relief through pills, which may only mask deeper unrest. This balanced view reflects an awareness of the complexity of sleep disorders and the need for integrated care. In sum, Section 6 offers a warm, thorough, and practical roadmap back to restful nights, emphasizing that the journey to sleep is a path back to ourselves. Gonzalo's narrative invites us to embrace patience, self-awareness, and kindness as allies in this vital quest, making the text feel less like a manual and more like a trusted companion. Luis María Gonzalo takes us deeper into the art of healing sleeplessness by focusing on behavioral therapy, a method grounded in retraining both body and mind to rediscover natural sleep rhythms. The chapter opens by setting a hopeful tone, acknowledging that our bodies often remember what our minds forget, and that through conscious effort, sleep can be reclaimed without relying on medications or quick fixes. Gonzalo begins by explaining that behavioral therapy works by gently re-educating the internal signals that govern sleep. He describes how the body's clock, once disrupted, can be reset by careful, consistent practices, and the mind, often burdened with anxiety or conditioned habits, must be patiently calmed and retrained. The text reveals the dual nature of sleep disturbances, a physical misalignment and a psychological barrier, both of which must be addressed in tandem. The narrative then shifts to practical steps within behavioral therapy, highlighting the importance of stimulus control, a technique that aims to restore the bed as a sacred place for rest, not for wakefulness or worry. Gonzalo illustrates this with vivid examples, such as advising patients to get out of bed if unable to sleep within 20 minutes, and only return when drowsiness returns. This method, he notes, helps to break the frustrating cycle of tossing and turning, teaching the brain to associate the bed strictly with sleep. Another key pillar described is sleep restriction, a strategy that might sound counterintuitive at first. Gonzalo explains how limiting time in bed can consolidate fragmented sleep, forcing the body to maximize rest during the allotted period. He candidly discusses the initial discomfort patients may experience but encourages perseverance, stating, "Short-term sacrifice leads to long-term renewal." This aspect of therapy calls for commitment and trust in the process, a reminder that true healing often requires patience. The author also emphasizes the critical role of cognitive therapy, which confronts the negative thoughts and fears surrounding insomnia. He narrates the struggle many face when their minds become prisons of restless thoughts, creating a self-perpetuating cycle of anxiety and sleeplessness. Through gentle cognitive restructuring, patients learn to challenge and reframe these thoughts, replacing, "I will never sleep again," with "rest will come in time." This shift, Gonzalo writes, frees the mind from its own sabotage. Interwoven through the section is the story of a man named Alejandro who battled chronic insomnia for years. Gonzalo describes Alejandro's skepticism and frustration, yet also his gradual transformation through behavioral therapy. Each night, Alejandro took a small step toward surrendering control, and each morning, a little more peace returned. Alejandro's journey exemplifies how these methods, though simple in principle, demand resilience and faith. Throughout, Gonzalo's prose maintains a warm, conversational tone, inviting readers to see behavioral therapy not as a rigid protocol, but as a personalized voyage back to natural sleep. He reminds us that sleep is a dance between body and mind, and behavioral therapy teaches the steps anew. His reflections gently acknowledge how modern lifestyles and stress often interfere with this dance, yet affirm the possibility of relearning harmony. This section closes with a contemplative note on the importance of consistency and self-compassion. Gonzalo encourages patients not to judge themselves harshly for setbacks, stating, "Recovery is not a race, but a gradual unfolding." Such words resonate deeply in today's fast-paced world, where the pressure to fix problems immediately often overwhelms. In summary, this part of El Sueño y sus Trastornos masterfully blends clinical insight with human empathy, portraying behavioral therapy as a powerful, drug-free path to reclaiming restful sleep. The narrative feels like a guiding hand, leading those lost in the fog of insomnia back toward the clear dawn of peaceful nights. In this section, Luis María Gonzalo thoughtfully guides us through the complex terrain of using medication for sleep disturbances, emphasizing that while drugs can have a role, they are never the first or only answer. He opens with a clear, balanced view. Medication is a tool, not a cure, setting the tone for a careful exploration of when and why pharmacological help might be appropriate, but also warning of the risks and limitations inherent in such treatments. Gonzalo begins by acknowledging the reality that insomnia can be a relentless enemy, one that sometimes overwhelms all other efforts. He explains that in severe cases, when sleep deprivation threatens physical or mental health, medication may provide a necessary bridge back to rest. However, he stresses that this is a bridge to be crossed cautiously, never a permanent residence. The author then details the different types of drugs commonly used: hypnotics, sedatives, and sometimes antidepressants or anti-anxiety medications, each with its own profile. He carefully notes their mechanisms, effectiveness, and especially their potential for dependence or side effects. Gonzalo quotes, What lulls one to sleep can also steal control if used without care, reminding us that these substances can sometimes worsen the problem they aim to solve. Central to the chapter is the clear message that medication should always be combined with behavioral changes. Gonzalo insists, drugs alone are but a bandage on a deeper wound. This reflection highlights the importance of addressing lifestyle, stress, and psychological factors. Otherwise, the body becomes reliant on external chemicals rather than relearning natural rhythms. The text also recounts cases where patients, initially resistant to behavioral therapy, turn to medication out of desperation. Gonzalo tells the story of Marta, a woman trapped in a cycle of pills that provided temporary relief but deepened her dependency. He writes, Marta's nights were punctuated by fleeting sleep and long awakenings, a reminder that chemical sedation is no substitute for true rest. Her experience serves as a cautionary tale about the seductive ease of pills versus the patient journey of retraining mind and body. The author further discusses the concept of medication tapering, underscoring that discontinuing drugs after prolonged use must be gradual to avoid rebound insomnia or withdrawal symptoms. This delicate process demands medical supervision and patient commitment, showing that while medicine may open the door, walking through it requires more than a pill. Gonzalo's tone throughout is compassionate yet firm, urging respect for the power of medications without surrendering control to them. He invites readers to view drugs as part of a broader toolkit, not a silver bullet. The reflection, true healing comes from within, not from a bottle, echoes like a gentle mantra. In closing this section, the author encourages a mindset of balance and wisdom. He acknowledges the frustrations of chronic insomnia, but also the importance of hope and persistence. The chapter subtly reminds us that while medicine can help quiet the storm, learning to navigate that storm on one's own brings the most lasting peace. This nuanced discussion resonates well in today's world, where quick fixes are often sought, but long-term well-being calls for deeper engagement. Gonzalo's insights serve as a valuable compass for anyone grappling with sleep difficulties, offering clarity on when medication fits and why it's just one step on the journey back to rest. Luis María Gonzalo takes us on a precise journey through the art of tailoring treatments specifically to the variety of sleep disorders that can plague the human mind and body. He reminds us that no two sleepless nights are the same, and thus, the path back to restful slumber must be as unique as the individual who walks it. Gonzalo opens by emphasizing that understanding the exact nature of the sleep disturbance is crucial. This is not a one-size-fits-all problem, but a complex web where factors intertwine. He explains how treatments must be custom-fitted to the rhythm and needs of each patient, rather than imposed in a generic fashion. The author introduces the idea that disorders such as insomnia, sleep apnea, restless leg syndrome, and circadian rhythm disruptions each demand a specific approach. For example, insomnia, the most common complaint, often benefits most from cognitive behavioral therapy designed to retrain the mind and body to welcome sleep naturally. He describes how this therapy involves reshaping thoughts, habits, and environmental triggers, essentially rewiring the brain's nighttime signals. In contrast, Gonzalo explains that sleep apnea requires a medical device like CPAP, continuous positive airway pressure, which physically maintains airway openness during sleep. He quotes, "Here, technology acts as a guard at the gate, keeping the breath steady and uninterrupted." This physical intervention differs fundamentally from behavioral methods, highlighting how diverse the treatment landscape must be. The restless leg syndrome, a condition characterized by an uncontrollable urge to move the legs, is approached with a combination of lifestyle adjustments and sometimes medication. Gonzalo notes the importance of iron supplementation in many cases, reflecting how even nutritional factors can play a role in restoring sleep quality. The author states, sometimes, the key lies hidden in the body's own chemistry, waiting to be balanced. Circadian rhythm disorders receive special attention as well. Gonzalo discusses how these disorders disrupt the natural sleep-wake cycle, leading to daytime fatigue and nighttime restlessness. Treatment here focuses on realigning the body's internal clock, using timed light exposure, melatonin supplements, and strict sleep schedules. He stresses that patience and consistency are essential, warning that forcing the body too fast is like trying to sprint before learning to walk. Throughout this section, Gonzalo brings in patient stories to humanize the clinical discussion. He tells of Jorge, a businessman whose erratic work hours triggered circadian misalignment, and of Elena, who battled insomnia worsened by anxiety. Their journeys illustrate the necessity of customized care, with each person's treatment plan adapted carefully to their unique life situation and disorder. The author also reflects on the interdisciplinary nature of treatment, acknowledging that sometimes collaboration between psychologists, sleep specialists, nutritionists, and even neurologists is required. Healing sleep is often a team effort, he writes, highlighting that the road back to rest is rarely traveled alone. Gonzalo's compassionate tone invites us to see beyond the disorder itself and into the human being affected by it. His words encourage hope and active participation. The journey to reclaim sleep is one of patience, understanding, and trust in the process. This perspective is both comforting and empowering. Interestingly, the detailed, tailored approach described here contrasts with many popular media portrayals of sleep disorders, which often simplify the problem to quick fixes or universal cures. Gonzalo's nuanced methodology aligns more with specialized documentaries that emphasize patient diversity and complexity, making this section especially valuable for listeners seeking depth beyond headlines. In conclusion, this part of the book reassures us that while sleep disorders are varied and sometimes stubborn, a careful, individualized approach guided by expertise and understanding can lead us back to the peace of rest. The author's focus on treatments shaped like a hand fits a glove reminds us that healing sleep is as much an art as it is a science. Finding the way back to rest unfolds as a nuanced exploration of the individualized nature of treating sleep disorders. Luis María Gonzalo's insistence on tailored interventions resonates deeply with contemporary understandings in sleep medicine, reflecting a shift away from the old paradigm of one-size-fits-all solutions toward a more patient-centered model. This approach harmonizes with advances seen in cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, CBTI, widely recognized today as the gold standard and supported by an extensive body of research, including works like Quiet Your Mind and Get to Sleep by Colleen Carney and Rachel Mamber. Gonzalo's emphasis on the uniqueness of each disorder and patient echoes the biopsychosocial model of health, which integrates biological, psychological, and social factors, a framework popularized by George Engel in the late 20th century. This model is particularly apt in sleep medicine, where physiological issues like apnea intersect with behavioral habits, emotional states, and environmental conditions. Gonzalo's narrative acknowledges this complexity, encouraging an interdisciplinary approach, a concept reinforced in modern clinical guidelines. Importantly, Gonzalo's treatment philosophy aligns with the broader societal shift occurring around the time of the book's publication. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, sleep medicine evolved from a niche specialty to a critical public health focus, spurred by rising awareness of the consequences of poor sleep, ranging from metabolic disorders to impaired cognitive function and mood disturbances. Public interest grew alongside medical research, as seen in popular media and influential titles like Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, which, while published later, shares thematic roots with Gonzalo's emphasis on individualized care. The book's reception, especially in Spanish-speaking countries, mirrored a hunger for accessible yet scientifically grounded information on sleep health. Gonzalo's clear, compassionate prose made complex medical concepts approachable, contributing to the book's positive critical acclaim and its status as a valuable resource. However, some traditionalists in the medical community at the time might have critiqued the book for not leaning more heavily on pharmacological interventions, reflecting a tension between emerging non-drug therapies and established practices. What sets Section 6 apart is its balanced stance on medication, not rejecting its use but underscoring it as a last resort and stressing that realigning the body's clock and rewiring the brain through behavioral changes should come first. This mirrors the evolving skepticism about over-reliance on hypnotics and sedatives, which, though effective short-term, often fail to address underlying causes and carry risks of dependency. Philosophically, Gonzalo's work invites reflection on humanity's relationship with rest, a state so fundamental yet increasingly elusive in modern society, dominated by 24/7 connectivity and relentless demands. His advocacy for personalized treatment can be seen as a metaphor for reclaiming balance and agency amid the chaos of contemporary life. In sum, Section 6 enriches the dialogue on sleep health by framing treatment as a tailored, empathetic process rather than a mechanical prescription. This perspective not only complements existing medical theories, but also anticipates future trends prioritizing patient individuality, making El Sueño y sus Trastornos a forward-thinking contribution to the literature on sleep and well-being. Section 7. Sleep Well, Live Better. Luis María Gonzalo opens with a powerful reminder that sleep is essential for physical, mental, and emotional health. Far from being a luxury or mere comfort, sleep stands as a fundamental pillar for our overall well-being, a basic need that humanity often neglects or undervalues in the rush of modern life. The author carefully guides us through the profound consequences that stem from chronic sleep deprivation, painting a vivid picture of the toll it takes on the body and mind. Gonzalo asserts, without proper rest, the body's defenses weaken, the mind loses clarity, and emotions run unchecked. This observation frames sleep not as passive downtime, but as an active, restorative process vital to maintaining balance in all areas of life. Through a methodical and compassionate voice, Gonzalo explains how poor sleep habits can lead to a cascade of health issues. He points out the insidious way in which lack of sleep contributes to metabolic disturbances, increased risk of cardiovascular disease, impaired memory consolidation, and heightened vulnerability to anxiety and depression. Here, his message aligns with modern scientific findings, yet he conveys it with the warmth and clarity that invite personal reflection rather than clinical alarmism. A particularly moving moment occurs when Gonzalo describes how emotional health is intimately tied to the quality of sleep, noting that emotional resilience fades without the nightly renewal that good sleep provides. This insight resonates deeply, as it highlights sleep's role not only in physical repair but also in regulating the very core of our human experience, our feelings and social interactions. Throughout the section, Gonzalo calls for a cultural shift, urging society to treat sleep with the care and respect it deserves. This is more than medical advice. It is a philosophical appeal, inviting readers to reconsider how they value rest amid the demands of a 24/7 connected world. His words act as a gentle but firm reminder that neglecting sleep ultimately costs us far more than time. It costs health, happiness, and life quality. This reflection naturally brings to mind the writings of Matthew Walker, author of Why We Sleep, who similarly champions sleep as a non-negotiable foundation for life. Yet Gonzalo's narrative adds a unique humanistic touch, emphasizing respect for sleep as a form of self-care and self-love, not merely a medical prescription. In closing, Sleep Well, Live Better stands as a compelling manifesto, one that calls us all to reprioritize sleep, not just for the avoidance of illness but for the pursuit of a richer, more balanced existence. Gonzalo's message feels especially urgent in our hyperactive era, where time saved by sacrificing rest is often time lost in vitality and joy. This section doesn't just inform, it invites transformation, gently steering us toward a fuller understanding of rest as the cornerstone of living well. Luis María Gonzalo's Sleep and Its Disorders arrives as a timely exploration of one of the most overlooked yet vital aspects of human health, sleep. While the science of sleep has been evolving steadily over decades, this book's comprehensive and approachable style bridges the gap between clinical research and everyday understanding, making it a valuable contribution to both public knowledge and the broader discourse on wellness. At its core, the book highlights sleep as not merely a passive state, but a dynamic process essential for physical restoration, cognitive function, and emotional balance. This view resonates strongly with contemporary works like Matthew Walker's Why We Sleep and Alan Rechtschaffen's foundational sleep research. Yet, Gonzalo's narrative stands apart by weaving in a more holistic perspective, emphasizing the cultural and psychological dimensions of how society treats or neglects sleep. His approach invites readers to see sleep as a human right and a personal responsibility, not just a biological necessity. The timing of the book's release intersects with a global shift in how modern life challenges natural rhythms. The rise of digital technology, 24-hour work cultures, and urban noise pollution all conspire to erode sleep quality worldwide. Gonzalo captures this tension, echoing concerns found in works like Sherry Tickle's Studies on Digital Distraction or Arianna Huffington's advocacy for sleep revolution. His argument that sleep deserves care and respect feels urgent amid the accelerating pace of the 21st century. Critically, the book was welcomed for demystifying complex disorders such as insomnia, sleep apnea, and restless leg syndrome without overwhelming jargon or excessive medicalization. Gonzalo's inclusive tone and practical recommendations appeal to both medical professionals and general readers, making it a crossover success in health literature. However, some critics have pointed out that while the book excels in diagnosis and treatment frameworks, it occasionally skirts deeper socioeconomic factors influencing sleep health, such as work inequality or urban living conditions. This critique opens a conversation that complements Gonzalo's work with broader public health theories, like those of Michael Marmot on social determinants of health, reminding us that sleep quality is not just a personal issue but a societal challenge. Furthermore, the book's relative focus on individual management contrasts with emerging research advocating systemic changes, like labor policies and urban planning, to improve population sleep. From a literary and cultural standpoint, Gonzalo's book fits well within a growing genre that treats health not just as a clinical matter, but as a narrative about how we live. Its reception reflects a public increasingly hungry for accessible yet substantive health knowledge that respects the complexity of human experience. Readers appreciate its balance of scientific rigor and empathetic storytelling, a blend that ensures the book's place as both a practical guide and a thoughtful meditation on a universal human need. In summary, El Sueño y sus Trastornos stands as a meaningful addition to contemporary health literature, inviting readers to reconsider sleep beyond the usual clichés. It complements and dialogues with existing sleep science while nudging society to recognize sleep as a foundation for holistic well-being. As modern life continues to challenge our natural rhythms, Gonzalo's call for respect and care towards sleep remains a resonant and necessary message, encouraging a shift not just in habits but in cultural values. Modern life doesn't like sleep. Screens, stress, overstimulation. We push ourselves to stay awake, then wonder why we can't rest. This book isn't just informative, it's a warning that reclaiming healthy sleep habits is not optional. It's essential for sanity, clarity, and healing. Sleep is a threshold between light and dark, between thought and dream. The Dream and Its Disorders by Luis María Gonzalo is a gentle but powerful guide into that realm. A place where the mind quietly reveals its deepest truths, if we're willing to listen. Do you struggle with sleep? Have your dreams ever told you something you couldn't explain? Tell me in the comments. Subscribe for more essays that explore the mind, science, and the hidden side of being human. And share this video if sleep has ever kept you awake at night.